One of the hardest things about doing like a massive omnibus style story that I never write down and only do from my head is there are certain glitches and inconsistencies in the telling of my story that some of you who are paying attention have noticed. Now, the last big Kryptonian epic video is Death of Batman, and I don't know the next time I'll be able to do something on that scale, but I realized there was an inconsistency involving one character that I should clarify. And I realized the best way to do that is that the Kryptonian epic is kind of like Game of Thrones, not in quality, but in quantity, meaning there's a lot of little stories of people that kind of dip in and out of the main narrative of Clark Kent. Like, I'm sure you noticed that the Death of Batman is ultimately a Superman story. The Kryptonian epic is a Superman thing. And for that reason, certain people come in and out of it. Characters like Lobo. Lobo really only appears twice. And the first time was in American Alien. He gets thrown into space. And the second time is later. And it's not an important appearance. He's just sort of there to serve a function. But someone who's not there to serve a function, and someone who actually has like a pretty detailed story and has since American Alien, is a guy named Rudy. Rudy was a young man who always had problems with confidence, but ended up finding a lot of confidence and a lot of self-assurance through baseball. He was a quiet guy who sort of always kept everything inside. He didn't really share. He was like a shy, quiet kid. And his parents sort of didn't really care about him that much because he was one of 6 siblings and the other siblings were all overachievers. And then finally Rudy found baseball, and now Rudy was going to be a big baseball player. That didn't pan out. Rudy got an injury very early on and spiraled bad. He became addicted to painkillers because of his injury. And that went all the way to America's opioid crisis. He became addicted to heroin. And upon being addicted to heroin, he lost most of his money, lost connection with his family. His siblings mostly cut him off. He already didn't really have any friends other than other addicts, and I don't know if you've ever been an addict, but hanging around other addicts doesn't lift you up. And so Rudy began to spiral more and more and more every day, to the point that the first time he saw Superman was before he was even called Superman. And it was after this sort of crazy series of events where there was a big fire downtown, and then in the stadium fire, there was a guy flying around grabbing people. And so Rudy, when he saw this guy flying in and out of this massive burning stadium in downtown Metropolis, one of, by the way, Superman's first big public appearances. Rudy was coming out of his dealer's place after being turned down because Rudy had no money and the dealer no longer wanted to fuck him. Rudy had been willing to do anything. And now Rudy had no connections and he had nothing. But he did see a want ad for medical testing. Upon entering a program run by a man named Kirk Langstrom at a place called Ace Chemicals, our buddy Rudy began to experience some changes physiologically. He was given a medication treatment involving a bright light that seemed to shine directly through him. And he was told that they had a technology that could make minor edits to his physical form simply through light. And he was like, okay. It didn't seem real, except for eventually he didn't want food anymore. He just wanted light. Preferably sunlight. It was almost like sunlight was now what was charging his body. Like they had like combined his DNA with like, I don't know, some form of life that was like a plant or something, like some weird thing, except for that's not how it manifests. He didn't look like a plant. He lost all the hair on his body and he asked to leave and he asked to quit the program. And around that time, he was told that he could not leave. So first his teeth fell out, then his eyelashes fall out. His skin becomes translucent. Rudy can't leave. He can't process food anymore. He's starting to get scared because he's starting to worry that he's dying. If they don't give him this light every day, he starts to kind of shed and come apart and physically shrink. But it doesn't even feel like he could die if they didn't give him the light. It feels like he would just keep shrinking. And that's what he remembered from heroin was You just start shrinking until you're nothing. But now there was no nothing. There was just endless shrinking. Rudy dissolving into himself, and every day he began to become more and more afraid, and every day he began to wonder more and more about what this program actually was and what it was turning him into. His jaw, the bones in it, melted. They were absorbed by his body, and suddenly the whole lower half of his face became this nasty, sucking hole. The teeth he'd lost were replaced by new teeth. The tongue he had once had was accidentally bitten off. He bit off his own tongue with these razor-sharp teeth. His eyes changed. He stopped being able to see color. Now he could see energy, but his nose was gone. He couldn't smell anything. He couldn't taste anything. And Rudy began to wonder, wouldn't it be better if I was just dead? But he couldn't die. He had to live like some sort of parasite, feeding off light that they would stream into the room once a day. This doctor, Pamela Isley, was in charge of supervising him. But in charge of supervising her was a man named Gerard Schugel. Gerard Schugel, who would eventually come to be known as the Ultra-Humanite, a brilliant scientist who was obsessed with genetic modification and the longtime creative and business partner of a guy named Kirk Langstrom. The thing is, Kirk was never really at the program. He was a very mysterious guy. No one really knew anything about how Kirk operated or what he did. He seemed to have a direct line to whoever was above them, but whoever was above them, their Ace Chemicals, it's like a subsidiary of Gotham Pharma, but that is a shell company for a number of different pharmaceutical companies, all of which are owned by fucking LexCorp. So is LexCorp the one who is feeding me these drugs that's making my body fall apart, that's making me turn into a monster, that's letting this woman, Pamela Isley was like this sort of like dowdy, out of shape, weird botanist, scientist, geneticist, and her whole thing with him was that he was becoming more pure. And Pamela one night woke him up in the middle of the night at the glass wall to his basically cell at this point. At one point they called it his apartment, but now there wasn't any electrical outlets or any lights or anything in there. It was just a dark cell that they would light with a candle, because if he sucked the energy from the candle, he'd again be plunged into darkness. So Pamela showed up one night in Rudy's room really late, and she was basically like, I've read your file. I want to let you know I've done something bad too. I had an affair with my boss at the college I worked at, where I was a scientist in the research program, and his wife found out, and I got fired from the college, so I killed them both. Humans, that's what they do, right? They betray you, they ruin your life, they fall in love with someone else. Rudy's in there like, he had a wife. But Pamela's just at the glass like, they let you down. And that's why you and I are going to be so important, because we're becoming something more than human. When I killed Shannon and Roy, that was their names, when I killed them, it was poisoning that did it. And I found something so beautiful in watching the natural state of death replace the chaos of their human lives. And Rudy, if you just embrace what's happening to you, that can happen for you too. And I can help you. What they're giving you, I can give you more. I can make you more powerful than you'd ever imagine. And all these people experimenting on you who keep you down and sell you drugs your whole life, they're not going to mean anything when you're a god. She began to supplement Rudy with genetic boosters. Now, when he drained energy, instead of simply feeding him, it allowed him to convert somehow the energy into mass. Rudy would expand, physically grow bigger. Let's go back to that guy, Gerard Schugel. So Gerard Schugel, Kirk Langstrom's partner, is the worst guy in the world. So if you've watched the Green Arrow video, you know about Dr. Sivana. Fuck Dr. Sivana. Like, he was a really bad guy. He fucked over Ollie. He fucked over Ollie's mom. He led to the creation of the Riddler. He led to a lot of deaths. He's a piece of shit, right? No, Gerard Schugel is a monster. This is the guy who Luthor hired to bring in Kirk Langstrom. Okay? Kirk, we'll get into him later, I promise. But Kirk, for most of his career, he's just like a geneticist who worked on the outside of things. Gerard Schugel is a career criminal with like a history of working with like fascist governments. He's a scientist only by sort of the token that he does science. This is someone who's totally in it for themselves. It's like fucking Gus Fring. This is a very, very, very dark, bad, scary guy who believes himself to be more human than human. He's the opposite of Pamela. God, I'm giving you guys a lot of test run to do this. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to do it off the dome. So I guess I will have to cut this down. This is going to be longer than I meant it to be. So Gerard Schugel notices that the parasite is getting bigger. And he can't pin down why, because Poison Ivy is doing it. So Gerard Schugel notices, hey man, the parasite, this thing, Rudy Jones, this thing is like got all these new fucking qualities. It can now like interpret energy into mass and grow. This is huge. But by this point, there's other problems, big problems, going down at Ace Chemical. You see, numero uno is that the entire team at Ace Chemical, and we'll get into this later, are fucking criminals. They are people collected by John Constantine, Luthor's basically consort, from all over the world to create the next generation of humanity. And potentially use that to kill the Superman. But the entire Ace Chemicals facility is not well run of security towards keeping people out and keeping eyes away from Ace Chemicals. But there isn't that great of security about keeping people in. When the parasite goes out of control, when Schugel attempts to biopsy him, the parasite is able to break free of the entire facility. And Rudy, confused and starving, goes on a rampage in downtown Metropolis. Multiple people are killed. Hundreds of people are injured. It is a tragedy. It is also the first ever appearance of a larger-than-life monster in the world of the Kryptonian epic. Everyone in the city is in shock. Metropolis still celebrates it. Now you can walk the path of the Rampage. You can literally, it's like literally a tourist thing, but it's historical. How the fuck did this happen? Where the fuck did this thing come from? Oh, nobody knows because Clark, like an idiot, if you've read American Alien issue fucking 5, he defeats the parasite by throwing him in the water, brings him back to Luthor and attempts to confront him. Dumbass move. Grade school move, checkers not chess. Of course, Luthor immediately dresses him down, takes Rudy back in. But Luthor now realized, I can't keep this thing. As long as I have this thing, people will be looking for it. So he took him out to the desert and sat Rudy, who was still mostly unconscious, because now if he doesn't get energy, he sort of spirals in and out of like this loopy dream state. He can never really tell what's going on. His thoughts don't come to him like human thoughts anymore. He's functionally blind. He can't eat and he has trouble speaking. And Luthor puts him in a hole and he fills the entire hole with concrete. So for years, 4 years, Rudy's at the bottom of a concrete pit and he can't move and he can't see and he can't breathe. But as he's down there, everything sort of slowly falls away and eventually time stops making sense. And eventually the idea of Rudy leaves him and he's just nothing. He's a thing in the ground that cannot die. And then little morsels, cell phone batteries, car batteries as they drive by. From a half mile away, over the course of years, Rudy slowly gets enough energy to finally grow and crack through the concrete. Now, I fucked up in an earlier video about saying what happens next because I jumped ahead. I'm not going to fuck that up now. I'm going to tell you what happens with Rudy Jones. Rudy re-enters a world, dazed, confused, homeless, unable to speak. That has radically changed. Apparently, Bruce Wayne was Batman. Lex Luthor is in jail. Ace Chemicals came apart. Someone called Mr. Freeze and another person called Barry Allen, who has some kind of weapon called the Flash. There was some sort of crazy thing involving a villain called Scarecrow. Like, Rudy's trying to like process all of this. There were 2 superhero teams. Bro, he saw one superhero while he was alive. He comes back into a changed everything, and he comes back to it with nothing. But there is someone on TV called Zatanna, this big pop star who can do magic. And she's one of the superheroes. And all of them, Zatanna especially, but all of them appear affiliated with Queen Industries. The parasite has nowhere else to go. He has 2 options, right? Just start draining energy from everything and turn into a monster and go on a rampage, or without eating once, drag himself across 9 states in the back of buses, hopping in the back of trucks, looking like a hideous, deformed monster. This thing looks like body horror. It looks like the things at the end of The Descent. It looks worse than that. It doesn't have a fucking mouth. It just has a sucking hole with teeth. And under that, somewhere is a kid with a baseball bat, wondering what his future will be. So now Rudy figures he can either try to break into Queen Industries or he can get caught by the Riddler immediately, which he does. So as it turns out, Edward Nygma, the Riddler, a delusional, narcissistic mass murderer who has, through hard work and the trust of friends, kind of hijacked his way onto the world's preeminent superhero team and has low-key helped them save the world multiple times. This dude, Edward Nygma, he never lost Parasite. He knows where he's been. He knew he was in the concrete. He knew he made it there. And Eddie shows up on his fucking own with a guy named Pete Ross. Pete Ross is working with something called the Super Friends. Right now, he's spending a lot of time with this woman, Diana of Troy, who's apparently some sort of like genetically modified super soldier. Rudy doesn't know what that means. Rudy can't believe that the Riddler, this like scary criminal apparently, is like working with the superheroes. No one knows that. But the Riddler is listening to him. And the Riddler explains, I want to help. What happened to you is horrible, but what happened to you is also special. You need to understand. If you can still hear my words, if you can still believe, then Rudy, it isn't over. You're totally unique on this planet. You have a chance. Don't give up. Over the course of the next 9 months, Rudy works pretty much every day with Pete Ross. Rudy learns American Sign Language to help him communicate, but he also gets better at verbally communicating and begins to make sounds that do sound like words and are understandable. Parasite kind of sounds like this when it talks. No, you don't understand. Like that. It sounds like someone talking with their mouth open. Pete realizes very, very early that Rudy has not done any experimentation with his powers. And Pete begins trying little things, like attaching a little generator to him. And sure enough, that energy to mass thing, after years of being unable to speak or eat or see, Rudy is able to restructure his own eyes and mouth and get his fucking face back. The first time Rudy sees himself in the mirror, after all this, he is seeing someone who might as well be a stranger. But to Rudy, that is not scary. That's a sign that something turned, because you can't go lower than he was. You just can't. There's rock bottom. He was on the bottom of rock. Shugel, that scientist, who was a huge fucking problem eventually for the society, he's one of the 3 supervillains they fought, a madman with incredible gene editing technology. This guy made Clayface. Well, that guy has now fled. He's escaped way, way, way out to North Korea, who are protecting him while he perfects a new generator. This generator is based off the same sort of technology that's cycling different types of particles, changing things, combining things, reintegrating DNA with solid matter with energy. the building blocks of the universe. This supervillain has basically become Julian Assange. Like, a lot of people think Jared Shugel's like a good guy who like got misled by Luther, because if you read about Kirk Langstrom, who's currently missing by this point, he was like a really good guy too. So like, isn't it possible that these are the guys, the public thinks, who created Superman, who created everyone? And there's this millionaire on TV, Maxwell Lord, saying like, free Luther, release the facts. He made all these superheroes. Don't you see? Where do you think they came from? Magic, space? You think people just stood up one day and decided, I'm going to do it for myself? You really think Oliver Queen got stranded on a desert island? It's all made up. It's all clearly fake news. You're all being lied to by Lois Lane, who, by the way, we can all say it out loud. Clark Kent is Superman. Yeah, he says it on the Daily Planet, and everybody already kind of knew, but you can't say it. So much is happening that is leading to the beginning of the story, the Society Endangered Species. Luther's on house arrest. Clark and Lois are going to have to resign from the Daily Planet. But Rudy Jones has his fucking mouth back, and he wants to know what the story is with Shugel. How the fuck did this guy get away? This is the guy that basically ruined his life. Pamela Isley was shot by SWAT when she had monstrous plans to attack a guy named Jimmy Olsen, a reporter named Clark Kent, in a story called Freeze, Test Run. But Pamela Isley's dead. So the woman who basically like fed this energy into him is gone. Now all he has is Shugel, and he doesn't want revenge. More than anything, Rudy wants to prove that Shugel was right. And he wants to stick it in Shugel's face. Right? You made me, and now I'm more powerful than anything you'll ever be able to control. But this is a guy living in a little apartment with his power pack. He can barely talk right. Rudy's goals right now are just to live a normal, good life. But he knows that the Queen Industries and all this stuff isn't happening to him just for him to like have a normal, good life. So on TV, when it turns out Shugel's massive generator he built, experimental generator, is in Pyongyang, and it's super cycling and going to be a thermonuclear explosion that will destroy North Korea, killing everyone inside of it. As Shugel and North Korea's leaders appear on TV and tell everyone that everything's fine and not to panic. Of course, the entire world media, world military surround it. There hasn't been anything like this since Toyman. A whole country is going to be wiped off the map for no reason other than arrogance and ignorance. And Rudy approaches Pete, watching on TV the satellite footage of this fluctuating, bursting, changing bursts of light, arcs of electricity. Rudy says, let's go. Pete Ross, Oliver Queen, charter a high-speed, high-altitude jet. Rudy says, I can fix this. And Pete says, I believe you. At 5 a.m., they fly over North Korean airspace, risking an international incident. As the fusion reactor begins to come apart, fire spilling out into the city, the communications and media blackout being revealed as a front, and an entire city of people watching light grow on the horizon as they know they are about to die. Rudy, thousands of feet in the air, does a halo drop with no parachute. Rudy hugs Pete, drops out the back of the plane, and plunges and plunges and plunges. Except for all that radiation coming off that fucking fusion reactor, even as he falls, he's growing and growing and growing and growing. North Korean people in Pyongyang see a tiny figure as the sun starts to rise, a tiny figure fall into the massive towers of the reactor as they burn. There's a burst of crackling energy that splays out and lights up the whole sky like it's the middle of the day, but it lights it up white. And then the fires go out. The noise of the generator stops. An entire nation, the entire world, holds its breath and then releases a shocked gasp as a creature more than 700 foot tall rises, the parasite having absorbed an entire nuclear explosion. Parasite, now a Godzilla-sized kaiju, mostly on fire, trembling with energy, smoke splitting out of it as seams rip in its bulbous body, its horrible mouth moving and swerving and spitting and vomiting energy as it takes 3 massive steps and tumbles into Pyongyang Bay. The entire bay erupts into steam. People near it get first-degree burns and have to fucking rush backwards. Fish are fried in the water. The fucking coast, the fucking tide goes like that out because of the amount of water dissipated. Korean soldiers swarm the bay. North Korean civilians swarm the bay. Everybody stands on the beach and waits and watches until the tiny naked figure of a man rises from the surf. I did it! I did it! I did it! You're safe! The North Korean soldiers slowly lower their guns. People begin falling to their knees. Rudy Jones, a man who never had a place in this world, the least loved of his siblings, the least cared about his whole life by others, and then eventually by himself, until eventually he was a ghost, a parasite, a thing that existed where a person used to be. He just saved 6 million lives. And he did it because he knew it was the right thing to do. And he did it because he was supported by the right people. Superman comes down to the beach. Rudy's never met this guy, really. I mean, he's like kind of known him. He knows Clark Kent is Superman, and they've had like little interactions. Nah. Clark's carrying Pete Ross, and both of them just charge Rudy and fucking hug him, and the 3 guys just fall down in the surf of Pyongyang, and Clark just keeps screaming, "You did it. Holy shit," and pointing at the destroyed reactor. Clark is literally standing like this, like looking around in disbelief. This was a problem the society didn't know how to solve. Well, sometimes you don't need the society. Sometimes you don't need to be a superhero. Sometimes all you need is the right people to believe in you in the right moment to make you believe in yourself. 1 year later, Rudy was asleep in bed at the Mayan Hotel in Metropolis when there was a terrible noise that awoke everyone in the city. A massive, bizarre planet had appeared in the sky over Earth. Rudy waited for 7 hours in the hotel room with his boyfriend, both of them panicking, both of them unable to decide what to do. What do you do? Rudy's beetle communicator given to him by Ted Cord lit up. There's some kind of monster in downtown Metropolis. Clark's going to try to fight it. Be there if you can. So that's the story of Rudy Jones without giving away any spoilers. One of the things that's been really interesting about this is I really don't know how to communicate 2 of the most important stories I would want to get out before the end of all this, which is the animated film. But who knows how long that's going to take. We need more animators because the main guy who's doing it is doing such an incredible job, but making an animated feature, even one that's like kind of in motion comic and kind of an explainer video, it's a lot of work. If you know any great animators, let me know because I'll pay them to do my silly fanfic. But thank you so much. I wanted to clarify the story of Rudy Jones. I think one of the things that's really interesting is Rudy is a character who I, in the telling of this, have fucked up a few times. But that was the correct Rudy arc. A lot of people still ask me, and I'm so flattered that you guys are paying attention, like, you said that Billy Batson and Wally West were going to be Robins, and now there's not even a Batman. How's that going to... Well, trust me. Trust me. Give me time. I'm telling you a really cool story. I promise you'll like the way it ends. Like, the Kryptonian epic is like my shit. And I'm just so glad that you guys have taken the ride. Thank you, everyone, again for watching Death of Batman, and fucking share it with people, man. Videos don't go viral anymore, and I'm an artist now. I'm not trying to make money off these videos, but I do want them to be seen because I think it's a story worth hearing. I think Rudy's story is a story worth hearing.